Welcome to GovCon Unscripted, where we dive into the unfiltered stories and strategies from all around the world of government contracting. Join host Chelsea Roberts as she explores how to navigate, thrive, and win in this complex but lucrative industry.
All right. Hey, everyone, and welcome back to GovCon Unscripted. I'm your host, Chelsea Roberts, CEO of Collaborative Compositions. And today I've got with us Shene Commodore, CEO of Commodore Consulting. Shene, who are you and what do you do?
Thank you. And great day, everyone. Not for sure which time zone you're in. I am Shene Commodore. I am the founder and CEO of Commodore Consulting. And we work with entrepreneurs to better understand what solution they provide to help agencies as well as other businesses meet the mission of the customers that they serve. We do this through helping you get GSA schedules, training you on AI to incorporate into your workflows, as well as proposal writing.
Interesting. Lots to offer there. And I'm sure you've got a lot of great insight that's going to come out during this conversation today. So how did you get into this? How did you get started?
Like most people in government contracts, you kind of just fall into it. So I am from Ohio, and when I was in high school, I had an internship with the Defense Contract Audit Agency my senior year of high school. After that, I had an internship from the University of Dayton at Wright-Patt Air Force Base Medical Center, where I was auditing. I was an intern to audit the contracts with the civilian doctors that came to the military facilities. So I maintained that position as a government employee throughout college. And then once I completed college, I moved into a regional contract administrative position with TRICARE. So I've had both sides of experience. During college, I was a government employee. Not long after college graduation, I became a contractor for the TRICARE regional program. Thank you to the veterans. Thank you to the reserves for your service. And then it just grew into other facets of government contracting. So I've dealt with all of the government, Department of Defense, Department of War agencies, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guards, and then as well on the civilian agency side, such as CDC, Health and Human Services, Fish and Wildlife, Department of Energy. So a little bit of both before starting my own consulting company.
Interesting. Now, did you work for a large business before? Or have you always been oriented?
Yeah. So after leaving the federal government sector, I worked for a large business with the TRICARE program, which was Blue Cross Blue Shield. TRICARE is divided into different regions. Blue Cross Blue Shield initially had that 5-state region of Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, Tennessee, and Kentucky. So that gave me experience in the government sector, but as well as the commercial sector, because there are commercial business. And if it's not a direct contract with the government, it's a commercial contract. So there are additional requirements that have to fall into place. So it taught me so much, not just about leadership and the C-suite, but about the commercial contracting and marketplace.
Interesting. Now, what motivated you to go out on your own and start your own thing?
So the other side of government contracting is that if you are bold enough and creative enough to want to become a contractor, you know that you win some and you lose some. So my contract experience with Blue Cross Blue Shield, even though that contract was protested, they won. However, they also decided, you know what, we don't want to be a government contractor for TRICARE. So they ended up working on an agreement for Humana to actually take over the region.
Wow.
And when they do that, they prefer to have their own senior leadership. So I was losing my job. And so I got to the point I was like, okay, what a professional association focuses on government acquisition and contracts, because I wanted to find out if there was a certification I could get to help me stand out since I was new. And I did. I found a NCMA and became a certified professional contract manager. And after that, I also decided that, okay, I don't want my future in someone else's hands. I had 2 small daughters at the time. I said it was something I always wanted to do. But after that, I decided I needed to prepare to start doing that, because I didn't want to be in a situation where I could not provide for myself or my family.
I have been in a similar situation, and yeah, it's something to see the writing on the wall, but it's an entirely different beast to take that opportunity and make that decision to go out and start your own business. And it's hard. It's not clear. There's no real playbook for how to do it and how to get set up. But ultimately, having more resources in this ecosystem and more folks that can provide that level of expertise that all of these small businesses need. They don't have that internally, and they oftentimes don't have the budget to buy it internally and maintain it internally. So that fractional and that support that you can get early on, like the more resources there are for the better, in my opinion. So I'm thinking that that's the great thing.
And that was one of the reasons I wanted to do it as well. I said, there's so many questions that people have on the government side as a government employee, because that would be our nature of work. To us, it would seem simple. It's there, but when you read it and you're not from that background, it's a different interpretation. And because these businesses are used to dealing in a different work environment, it really is not as simple as you would think. So I also said, not only did I not want to leave my fate in someone else's hands, I wanted to help other people build their businesses as well. And so that's how I got focused on not just entrepreneurship, but working with small businesses to help them build sustainable, scalable businesses, whether they want to focus more as a prime contractor and take on more of the risk with the government, or they just want to diversify their portfolio as a commercial or private entity where they have some government contracts.
Yes, I find that's definitely a hard transition to make. Companies need all the help that they can get in making that transition, especially now in such changing and turbulent times in this ecosystem that we're living in. There's so many rule changes and so many sort of priority shifts that agencies are taking that it seems like they're aggressively making the changes, and they're different changes than what we've seen in the past. You mentioned earlier talking about GSA and GSA schedules, and I'm curious how you've seen that develop over the past 2 years even. Has that become something that's more important for companies to pursue, or is that something that the companies can still sit on the side and watch from the sidelines?
Yeah, I definitely think pursuing a GSA schedule, there's more of a reason to pursue. However, it still needs to be a decision based upon a person's particular company structure. And I want to go back a little bit and touch on your comment about aggressive changes.
Yeah.
This situation that we're in with the revolutionary FAR revisions, major change in over 40 years. I want to stress that every administration that comes in usually has some kind of revisions. These are significant, however, is what the difference is.
Yeah.
The reason that it feels so fast-paced and so aggressive is because although there are a lot of flexibilities, there are quite a few things now that you no longer have to do or should be doing in terms of what's happened. So we have a combination of executive orders giving directions to government as well as a preference for commercial entities. And then there are the regulatory factors. So you have acquisition regulations with the federal acquisition regulations in the FAR. You still have commercial changes that are happening with those UCC Uniform Commercial Codes, in addition to executive orders. So there's a lot happening, which is why it seems so aggressive and so fast. And I think because of that, companies need to be more assertive, and you definitely need someone skilled in government acquisition as well as contracts to help guide you through, what does this mean for us? How does this apply to us? How should we change our company policies and procedures? Now, in that, there are some things that are still required. They've always been required, which is you have to be a qualified contractor. That's never changed. So I do also want to correct the myth that now you have to be qualified. That's always been a requirement. Contractor qualifications, that's FAR Part, I believe, 9, has not changed. Do you have the skills, capabilities, and knowledge to do the work? Period. Now there is going to be more attention, however, on pricing. Do you have consistent practices for creating, estimating, and proposing prices, right? That is looked at significantly now. And when you add the AI into that, where you want to have an efficient business, and by being more efficient should naturally have some cost savings, is do you have those consistent processes in place, and where can you create some automations in your workflow to help it run faster, but also help you make more timely decisions. So a big part of decision making on the government and the industry side is how fast can you make a good decision, right? Especially when we look at the warfighter, right? When you have a contract with the Department of Defense, it's about how quickly can you enhance or enable the warfighter, right? Speed and relevancy are extremely important, which is what takes us to GSA, right? We now have this requirement that GSA is the centralized procurement agency for the government. To that, I would say GSA has always had a federal acquisition services side, FAST, where they've always provided the agencies an opportunity where they handle the procurement for them. The other side of GSA is for the commercial entities. Do you want a GSA schedule? And you go through the application process of qualifications, relevant experience, customer references, and fair and reasonable pricing. So I said that to say that the goal is that you have to look at it that it's centralization of procurement for more routine buys. If it is mission specific to an agency, they still have the freedom to handle that acquisition themselves, which is also why you see news from the Pentagon that is saying we're going to have specific acquisition requirements when dealing with our military and armed forces. So you need all of it. When it comes to GSA schedules, I also want to make a distinction. You still need to make sure it's a good fit for you, for your entity. There are some buys that still happen without a GSA schedule. However, are we going to see that become more limited? I believe so, because even in the FAR, the preference is that an agency buys off of a government contract vehicle, which would be GSA, or we have government vehicles like OASIS Plus. There is MAPS that is coming out, as there is NASA SOUP and et cetera. So part of any one strategy, if they're going to be successful in government, is identify what government contract vehicle best suits you. And I do suggest having a GSA schedule first because, like I said, that's where most routine buys will come from. That doesn't mean that's the end, but you still need to know when do you need it, right? How much of your revenue is generated from a GSA schedule, because maybe it's not time for you yet. Maybe you need a partner that you've vetted and you trust, and they have a GSA schedule, and you're allowed to partner with them and use their schedule. So there's different ways to navigate the GSA space. You can have a GSA schedule yourself. Maybe you have a teaming partner that allows you to have an agreement where you're using those GSA schedules. And in addition to that, if you obtain your own GSA schedule, you can form a GSA contractor teaming arrangement so that both of you are getting credit for the GSA sale.
Interesting. I have not dug much into the GSA specific contractor teaming agreement type things that come out of there. I'm very fluent in teaming kind of across the government in different arrangements, but I think it's slightly different when it comes to GSA. They have some different rules in place and they like to make sure credit's given where credit's due. Can you talk a little bit more about those teaming agreements that you see on GSA schedules?
Okay. So you have a standard where it's a prime sub relationship. In that case, the prime is getting the credit. What's happened now is that GSA, as well as other agencies, are saying, we understand the small businesses that now want to do business with the government. We know that has been shrinking, right? We've lost some small businesses. We know that if we're going to grow and develop the defense industrial base, we need small businesses. We want their innovation. So how can we help them, right? And even in subcontracting, we've heard from the small businesses on the government side that, hey, we want credit for our work. Why can't we get credit as a sub? So one of the ways that you can get credit is if all parties that have an agreement have a GSA schedule, you'll each get credit for what you're doing for that particular arrangement. You can also apply for a GSA JV schedule, where if you have an approved joint venture agreement that is approved by the Small Business Administration, you can apply for a GSA JV schedule, even if the small business doesn't have a schedule.
Interesting. So that opens up some additional doors for relationship growth, it sounds like, on and around schedules. Do you see there being a benefit to companies coming together as JVs or forming those teaming relationships before they start investigating GSA schedules?
Remember that a JV agreement is a separate legal entity. Difference between a prime sub versus a separate legal entity, right? So there are some changes that I do expect, however, are going to happen with that. If someone was interested in obtaining a JV, applying as a JV GSA, you could simply Google GSA Mass JV, and there's a Q&A that comes up with that explains the common Q&A that come with that. The other way that the GSA JV works is each party has their own GSA schedule and their own NAICS codes, their own labor categories, right? When you apply for the GSA JV, you have to propose the services and labor categories that you have, right? So even though you have this combined company, this separate entity, it's still based upon the unique award that each JV member has. And you would still make the distinction between who is the small and who is the large. But the benefit is if you are allowed as that JV entity to now apply for work that maybe wasn't on your schedule as a JV, that gives you relevant past performance experience in that work.
Right.
So there's a way to plan and strategize for that. So is it an organization that you trust? Do we have complementary NAICS codes, special item numbers, or NAICS codes, those North American industry service classifications? How might this work? Do we have customers as a JV that would be buying off of GSA for this project? And I want to stress that as part of the homework with GSA. If your customer is not buying off of GSA in a distinctive amount and you don't have any relationships, it's all about relationships, whether you have GSA schedule or not. You have to take time to build the relationships.
Right.
GSA is becoming really stringent upon basic compliance for GSA schedules. You have to have within 2 years $25,000 worth of sales. Within your 5 years, it's $125,000, right? So if you don't stay in compliance with gaining sales in your contract, you can lose your contract. That's grounds for losing. If you're not reporting your sales on time, you can lose your contract. Even if it's zero, you have to actually report zero. And now GSA has transitioned to what is considered transactional data reporting, where every GSA schedule holder on a monthly basis has to report on 16 different data elements. And what the other side of that, what I think people should realize is that the government, GSA, is building this large database of information to have a better holistic review of what are they spending money on. Typically, what is a typical buy from a different category? There are 10 major categories that the government buys from. So they're looking at that buy category and they're saying, how much do we normally spend in this area? What are the providers we normally spend? Because they're saying, okay, so if this is what we typically spend, then this is the prices that we should typically approve. And what's going to happen is as companies enter into this space or want to negotiate to stay in the GSA space, they're going to have to fall within the ranges that they've accumulated from these TDR reports and marketing research in order to be deemed fair and reasonable pricing.
Now, there's something else that I think was recently changed or adjusted within the schedule realm, or at least with the government-wide acquisition type vehicles and IDIQ vehicles. And I think it was that you can now do BPAs under individual IDIQ contracts, which I think the mass kind of qualifies as. So I think there's some distinction between setting up a BPA under an OASIS contract or setting up a BPA independently underneath some larger IDIQ vehicle. Do you have any thoughts on that and what that looks like and how that's going to transpire?
It's an area we need to continue to watch because it's not just changing in the GSA space, it's changing overall, even if you look in the FAR. I want to say also, thanks for bringing up BPA. When it comes to using experience, if we wanted to apply for another government contract vehicle, like OASIS Plus, for example. You have to meet a certain threshold to be able to obtain an OASIS Plus schedule. I think companies need to do a better job of tracking what counts as an actual sale that's generating revenue and what counts as an actual contract award, right? If there is no specific order against your master agreement or BPA in which you're getting paid, it's not going to typically count as a sale. That's why in OASIS Plus, they want you to provide a copy of the contract award, a copy of the BPA, copy of the subcontract agreement, and a copy of the task order or delivery order, because that is where you get credit for actually having experience, right? So I like to say it's one thing to just keeping it simple. It's one thing to have a car. It's another thing to know how to drive the car. So the government's, okay, that's great. You said you can do this thing. Now prove to us that you can do it. And how can you prove that you can do the work if you haven't actually done any yet? So I think as we go through this process of growing through these new changes, entrepreneurs have to be able to categorize, yes, I have a BPA. This is going to help limit competition and get me in the door. What is my strategy for actually generating sales and orders off of this BPA? And all of that is important because when you're getting reviewed, GSA is saying, okay, what have you done similar to scope and complexity to what you're applying for? And the next question is, how well did you do it? So that is where those CPARS reports and the past performance questionnaires or references come in, right? So it's what did you do and how well did you do it? And is it relevant to this scope of work that you have? So it's one, supporting documentation to prove that you've done it and how well that you've done it. But the next part of that is the scope review. And I think that's where some companies, I believe that they're capable. They just don't know how to explain that clearly so that it is approved. And that's also an area now where GSA is using AI. So when you send in these supporting documents, if the task and the description or the mission don't align with the descriptions of the NAICS codes, it's not going to look like a scope map. So it's not that you're not qualified and you didn't do a good job, but let's say you send in projects that align with 541330 on engineering services, right? But you're applying for maybe a NAICS code of IT professional services, 541511 or something like that. You have to take the time to point out why there are some tasks within that work that align with the IT services description. If you don't, you will not pass the scope review. And that is a distinction that I believe everyone needs to get better at doing, whether it's a GSA schedule or an open opportunity bid or some other schedule. You've got to be able to connect the dots on how the scope of your project aligns with the scope and definition of the NAICS code.
Yeah, and I think that touches on something really important too in the way that we look at these large IDIQ vehicles, and you see everybody announcing, I just want a spot on this multi-billion-dollar contract.
Yeah. But show, as they say, what's that movie like Jerry Maguire? Show me the money, right?
Yes.
Show us the money. You need it now. Great. You're ahead of your competition, but now you got to make it work. Yeah. Generate some sales, build some relationships, sustain some relationships, and actually generate a specific award off of that. And you've got to be able to talk the talk, which is how does your experience and your qualifications align with the task in the NAICS code? And what I like to say is too, for people that if you don't understand that, think of your resume, right? Which is why you don't just send generic resumes with the proposal, okay?
Sure.
If you have a resume and they meet minimum education or minimum experience requirements, you still have to revise the resume to show that they've actually completed work related to the tasks that are required. Or that resume is not going to count. They're going to be like, okay, they don't look qualified. And I have sat on the government side and made that decision. And I've also done the same thing, working with clients, helping them. On source selection committees, I can't count how many times as the government we've said, yeah, they submitted resumes, but I can't see where they've actually done this work before in this RFP. So you're not getting credit for that. Everything needs to map. And then it is, okay, so it does map. And is this still aligned with the scope for what this project is for? So we know that the government assigns NAICS codes by where does most of the work fall. the preponderance of the work.
Right.
That doesn't mean that's the only NAICS code. So to really deal with all the bundling, packaging of large businesses and changes that we're having, companies have to be better at identifying what NAICS codes go with this work. How can I show that I have this experience and track those in a database so that it's easy to be able to pull that up when you want to bid on something or when you want to prove that you have the experience.
Now, that sounds like a process or an internal sort of like operational directive that would be well suited for something like AI. You mentioned that the
Yes.
GSA is using AI on their side. So, how are you seeing companies successfully implement AI to help keep them on the right side of compliance, to help keep them in submitting? What are the best uses for them?
So many different uses with AI. You can have a standard task, right? Just standard routine tasks that are automated, such as checking your email, putting them in certain folders, sending you automatic notifications if it's from a certain person or if it's an emergency. You can also use AI tools. Let's say you've had a series of meetings on a key project. You can set up an automation where when you work on that project, everything about that project is in a certain folder. You can give the AI tool instructions to summarize everything related to that project. So let's say I was working on a GSA schedule for the ABC company. I could create a task or workflow when I got to a certain place within that proposal that is summarizing the key point. Please summarize all the meetings related to pricing, and it will do that, right? And then populate that. I can also use AI tools for market research. That's a great way to do that, right? One of the things I advise companies to do is you can go into Chat GPT or some other tool and just prompt it, which is simply instructions. If you know how to ask questions, the better your questions are, the better your response, right? So ask questions, set up those prompts, and just ask it, hey, these are the kind of services or solutions my company provides. What are the top NAICS codes for my company? And then having it build from there to help you identify top agencies. Another thing you can do with it is to prepare presentations. These agencies now are moving towards oral presentations. There will be some instances now where there may not be technical proposals. Companies will be required to participate in oral presentation process. So there is an AI tool that I like called Gamma AI, which generates presentations in a matter of minutes. I can put in a prompt and it will give me an outline and a template. I can check that. Now, one thing to do is you always want to verify your data. Is it current? Is it recent? Is it relevant? Because AI makes mistakes. And when we are training people on how to use that, we explain to them how to set up their AI tools to limit those mistakes because you have to set up guardrails to deal with possible bias or mistakes, also known as hallucinations, because you always want to monitor your output. So AI is a first look. It should never be your end all. You've got to go through the process of checking it. But yeah, there are several different automations and tools that we've done. So they could be simple to complex, but there's a lot of different things to do. And a lot of the agencies are all setting up their own use cases on how they're going to use AI.
Now, I could personally see captions and headlines for articles that just go out of their way to disclose some interesting usage of AI that they may not be necessarily in compliance with all of the regulations and all of the cybersecurity requirements that are out there, for instance. So how are you seeing companies kind of address that need to balance cybersecurity compliance with using new tools?
So first of all, don't put anything secret in there, right? So that's one thing. Be mindful of what you put in. Also, if you're uploading things, there's a way to redact certain key areas and so forth and look for that. So that's one way to do that. And then what a lot of companies are doing, as well as government agencies, they're having entities create their own LLMs, which is that large language model, which houses the data that the AI is learning from. So that is an additional safeguard, creating your own LLM that you can enter information into and use and have always set up multi-authenticators as well, right? If you can set up for text, you can set up for general authenticators. maximize the authentication process that you have, and then, of course, incorporate some other guardrails. For example, when you are building an automation, you have to tell the AI tool where are the files located that are going to store the information it needs to pull from, right? Then you are giving it those specific instructions in which this is what I want you to do with this information. This is where you pull the information from. This is the frequency. This is the approval process. And you're merging those together to set up those automations. There's a lot of different things to keep in mind. And then when it comes to data, always remind people, check your facts. Before AI even came, we were responsible for verifying the accuracy of data. It's no different now. So when I hear someone say, "Oh, AI," we've always had to check data. That's nothing new. Okay. So I don't think that's a fair thing to say about AI. It is the tools now have more data to pull from, but you've always had that responsibility. So I use the acronym, I say C.R.A.P instead of the other way, but is your data current? Is it relevant? Is it by someone of authority that is knowledgeable? Is it accurate? And what was the purpose that the data that you retrieve pull for? Because if you use data that has a bias or is political or created from a different reason, you're more than likely going to make mistakes in the data. So currency, relevancy, authority, accuracy, and purpose. That's one way to verify the data. And then once you pull it, you're continuing to revise it based upon your information and assemble more data based upon your information and go from there.
Interesting. It sounds like there's a lot of different places to implement AI and get some of these workflows streamlined and more efficient. But it sounds like there's also a lot of caveats and challenges to make sure that you're keeping an eye out for.
Because remember, AI tools mimic the human mind. That's something else I remind people. It mimics. What can it mimic if it doesn't know?
Yeah.
How effective will it be at mimicking if there's no way to check for accuracy or make sure that it's using the right information? So does it pull data faster, better, and gives you a lot of things very quickly? Yes, it does. But remember, it mimics. And also remember GPT, right? Even though all the tools aren't named GPT because they're AI tools created all the time.
Yeah.
So your tech stack might not look like my tech stack, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. We use what best suits our roles and responsibilities. But GPT, if you remember, it stands for a generative pre-trained transformer. And what it means is these language models that house all of this data, they are generating new information and they are learning from pre-training, and that's transformed into new information. So it's always going through this generative pre-trained transforming. It's learning as it goes. So we want to make sure that it's learning from the right data.
Yeah, that's a big lift. And I think companies, as they're starting to go through their AI strategy and sort of develop and implement some AI techniques and tools to help streamline their workflows, they're going to really have to take that into consideration.
Right. What makes sense? What has the most impact? And how does it integrate into your other systems? You don't want to just deploy it everywhere. You have to test it first and identify specific use cases. And we recommend you have a small group of people try it out first. Don't just deploy it everywhere. So there's definitely some steps, and there's a lot of different ways to use it. You don't have to use all of the AI tools. It's really what best fits your organization.
If folks want to get to know you more, or if they want to know how they can leverage AI tools more effectively, or if they are trying to figure out how to automate their entire GSA reporting process by leveraging AI tools, how can they reach out to you to figure all that out?
Yes. So I'm on LinkedIn under my name, Shene Commodore. That's Shene Commodore, Commodore. And then I have a Commodore Consulting webpage. And I also have a Stand Store under my name, Shene Commodore Stand Store. So Stand Store is another tool in which it's really like a soft landing page. You can place your products there, whether they're free or calls, and it's an easier way for people sometimes to find you versus getting lost on a web page and so forth. I do have the Stand Store as well, but either one of those will work. And then also email, you can info@Commodore Consulting, so we can make sure to direct you to the right place. But I advise nothing has changed in terms of building relationships in this government space. And for GSA, just you need to make a decision. How frequently are your customers using and what kind of buys do they have off of GSA to assess, do you need one and when, or is this something you can partner on? But I do believe that anyone that's going to be successful in the government marketplace, because it's centralized now and strategic sourcing and pricing is taking such a monumental, that's where the attention is. You do need to have some kind of contract vehicle strategy. GSA schedule, OASIS, something, but figure what that looks like for you.
Absolutely. And we'll get all those links into the show notes so everybody has a chance to check those out and get a hold of you. If you ever got any questions or are interested in exploring more about leveraging AI in the government contracting space, or if you're curious about the GSA schedules and if you need one or how to get on one, definitely reach out to Shene. She's got a lot of wisdom she's brought with her, and she's started this amazing company. So we're excited to see where that goes. We really appreciate having you on the show this week. This has been a great episode. For everybody out there doing your part, leave a heart, listen, get this out there to folks, share, subscribe, and get Shene's name out there into the ears of others. And we'll see you next week for the next episode of GovCon Unscripted.
Yeah, thanks. And if you want me to come back just to discuss AI in government, I'm happy to do that too.
Absolutely. We would love that. That would be a great topic. All right. Thanks, everyone, for listening this week. Come back next week for next week's episode of GovCon Unscripted, and we'll see you there. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of GovCon Unscripted with your host, Chelsea Roberts. Do you have a GovCon story or need guidance in government contracting? Connect with Chelsea on LinkedIn to be a guest on the show or to enhance your business strategy. Don't forget, your network is your net worth. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share this episode with your growing GovCon community.